Αξιότιμοι αδελφοί πατέρες, αγαπητοί συναδέλφοι, αγαπητοί αδελφοί κυρίες και κύριοι, στην επικρατούσα φιλοσοφική αντίληψη της σύγχρονης σκέψης, ως αποτέλεσμα των διχογνωμιών των μεγάλων φιλοσοφικών ρευμάτων που ακολούθησαν την αναγέννηση, αλλά και της πρόοδου της τεχνολογίας και των φυσικών επιστημών, ιδίως της πληροφορικής, ο νους ορίζεται ως το σύνολο των γνωστικών λειτουργιών του ανθρώπου, όπως αυτές παράγονται αμέσως ή εμέσως από τη συνάφεια ενός συνόλου νευρικών κυττάρων, τα οποία βρίσκονται στον εγκέφαλο και στα άλλα όργανα του ανθρώπου. Στην ομιλία αυτή αναλύεται αυτή ακριβώς η αντίληψη των γνωστικών λειτουργιών, επισημαίνοντας την αναγκαιότητα της χρήσης τυπικών συστημάτων ή formal systems, αφού η ίδια η επιστημονική και τεχνολογική
formal systems, since the technological approach is highlighted with the production and use of axiom systems. There we base the development of artificial intelligence systems, since the models for the management of information and the increase of computational power led to a more effective generation of content based on a pre-existent formalistic knowledge, as this is standardized with the theory of information, making the prediction of linguistic concepts possible with great accuracy. However, the theorem of non-completeness of Kurt Gödel concerning formalistic systems and the chaotic systems study results highlight the relative force of artificial intelligence systems that can be generated irrespective of the capacities of the model. That is why it is highlighted that nous, as is defined by St. Gregory Palamas in Orthodox tradition, within the framework of the interpretative attempt to explain the relation between God and the human person and the created and uncreated, cannot be defined on the basis of any mathematical systems based on axioms. This relation with God supersedes axioms and can be understood only through its empirical prospects. This is what the theology of Palamas tries to present, with the superior nature of the nous, which is created in the image and likeness. The uncreated actions of God through neptic aesthetics can contribute useful information vis-à-vis the way in which we understand what is happening with artificial intelligence progress, the limits, the possibilities, and where they could lead us. Artificial intelligence is understood as a model, a statistical model for the processing and synthesis, following possibilities of the morphology of language. Therefore, we can study the limits and the possibilities afforded and maintain our intellectual identity, not because we cling on a past or a cultural or spiritual commitment, but because standardization, the formalistic understanding of knowledge, has important and insurmountable limits. But what is formalism? Or what is knowledge with formulas and numbers? And how is this related to artificial intelligence? Formalism, especially in the theory of mathematics and logic, is an approach that understands mathematics as a total of symbols and rules that do not have a real content by necessity. They matter because there is cohesion and consistency in their rules. The significance is always determined by the observer. The real content is projected on the rules, the formulas, and the algorithms, and through this projection, we try to recreate this real content, which, because of the limitation of the initial projection, the regenerated content is by definition deficient. That is, human persons understand their environment with their senses, and this recording of dialogue and communication between humanity in any form, be it language or mathematics, is something related to formulas and measurements. Modern AI is formalistic. It is related to measurements, recordings, types, algorithms, measurements that depend on clearly delineated rules and structures of logic. On the other hand, in the Orthodox tradition, as the great fathers of the Church have described, and as many have expressed it, especially St. Gregory Palamas, there is a distinct differentiation between the described logos, that appears to be the energy production of the mental from the mind itself. This is related to cognitive functions, but does not identify with them, because of the fact that we don't have much time, I shall talk about St. Gregory Palamas concerning the properties of the mind and the discursive part of the soul. In the 150 chapters of St. Gregory Palamas, it is mentioned. Something very important is mentioned, in my opinion, something that definitely the tradition of scholasticism and the prevalence of reason was unable to understand for 500 years or ignored it altogether until the scientific progress at the end of the 19th century and during the entirety of the 20th century brought it back to the surface necessarily. The super perfect goodness that St. Gregory Palamas defines as nous, saying that it is a true goodness that of the nous, of course, will generate logos, but not logos or word, which is similar to our oral speech. He's trying to express the difference between oral logos from the logos generated by the nous, which is related to life. Oral logos or prophorikos logos does not pertain to the mind, but it is produced by our body, which is moved by the nous. And here there's a distinction between endothetos logos and diathetos logos. And diathetos logos is inner. It takes part inside our body, in our thoughts, even without sounds, either with pictures, images. Our imagination follows a logical process until the time it reaches a conclusion. On the other hand, the innermost logos of Palamas is generated by the nous and is always related to the nous and was given to humanity by nature. As human beings were created in the image of God, Palamas was able to grasp something that we started understanding in the middle of the 20th century. We have a problem with the definitions of logic and mathematics, and to understand systems of logic, what we need is an external system, and this needs to be non-formalistic. In 1927, two famous mathematicians of that time, amongst the greatest mathematicians of all times, Bernard Russell and Alfred Whitehead, published the second and complete version of Principia Mathematica, a 3-volume voluminous work with which they tried to build the edifice of mathematics and with it all sciences, based on axioms, types, and formulas and numbers, that is formalism, or modern language in the generation, processing, storage of quantified information. 2 years after that, however, there came a young mathematician, 23 years old, and he stirred the waters of scientific community, presenting his doctoral thesis at the University of Vienna. Kurt Gödel was his name. He proved that any system of logic or values that is consistent can never be complete. And a consistent system cannot prove all that appears in the system. This means that there is an external logical system that is a sine qua non to prove the consistency of our system. This external system needs another external system, and this is a never-ending cycle. In simple words, so many years of work of Russell and Whitehead turned out to be of no use, and this was proven by this young man from Vienna. What we are studying as artificial intelligence, or as posthuman, generally speaking, or posthumanism, even though the term appears to me an exaggeration and perhaps describes a latent tendency of human beings to reduce themselves to formalistic models that are only utilitarian. This is based on recording knowledge by extracting motifs and machine learning through a huge volume of data. And deep learning neuronal networks, in conjunction with processing of natural language through the statistical analysis of words and sounds, can simulate processes accurately and generate answers that appear to be like those that a human being would provide, alluding to intelligence. And they succeed even in the Turing test. But there is a problem in defining conscience and understanding it, because there are self-references in models, and the scientific interpretation is either deficient or it is proposed through non-formalistic or quantic processes and procedures outside the system, because, as Gödel proved to understand this, we need an external system of axioms. In this way, we have a type of nous that is purely mechanical and programmed. It is the endiathatos logos of Saint Gregory Palamas that takes place in the body or in a mechanical way, even without sounds, with images, with a person's imagination following a logical path. Endotatos logos, that is the human mind, is not limited to logical and intellectual processing. It's an intellectual power capable of superseding formal data and the limitations of formulas to unite itself with God, experiencing something that does away with any calculation. The nous of Palamas is not restrained by data or likelihood, but can turn towards God, be enlightened and united with God. The grace, the holy grace, cannot be generated by statistical models because it is not dependent on data or information, but on the purity of the heart. This is the Taborian experience and the experience of the Apostle of the Gentiles, Paul, who, in fact, was caught up into paradise and heard unspeakable words, not lawful for a man to utter. There are truths that cannot be explained by formalistic systems because they remain captive to these limitations and they can never go near true and real knowledge. How can we describe the relation with God, the experience of love, and the ascetic self-denial? Of course, these models, as it happens with modern applications of artificial intelligence generating information that grew very popular in the past 2 to 3 years, they can help us solve practical models, analyzing data, understanding trends. But how do we prescribe or lend the intellectual levels? Palamas is asking us to see the difference between the mechanical mind and the real nous that can turn to God and experience the presence of God. My dear ladies and gentlemen, the challenge of our times is to use artificial intelligence as a great tool at the service of humanity. I propose it to my students as a tool to correlate information, but there's a risk of regarding everything that it generates as truth, neglecting the true dimension of our existence. True wisdom and true knowledge are not shadows and projections, but they come from the union with God and not a simple analysis of data, even though it may be overly impressive to us all. Thank you very much.